when Castro took over, the communists always start with the kids. They target the kids. Che Guevara, I describe how he described kids as malleable clay that you can remove all the defects from. And by defects, they mean any attachment to anything other than the state.
How do we unwoke America? How can we wake up leftists in America to the real consequences of their disastrous policies and what it's doing to our children? Is it even possible? I have Senator Ted Cruz on today's show to discuss his new book. I'm so excited about this because he's going to give us a layout. And by the way, folks, here it is. Ted Cruz, Unwoke, How to Defeat Cultural Marxism in America. We have never needed this book more than we do now. You do not want to miss this episode. He goes into details that I didn't even know existed. I'm serious. It's going to wake you up. We are going to change America. We are going to unwoke America as we wake up. Don't miss this show. But first, I need to thank Beam Dream. I know. I love that name. Beam Dream makes me like I'm floating on the moon or something. You know, when we've been raving about Beam's Dream Powder, their healthy hot cocoa for sleep. And today my listeners get a special discount on Beam's Dream Powder, their best-selling healthy hot cocoa for sleep with no added sugar, now available in delicious flavors like sea salt caramel, cinnamon cocoa, and chocolate peanut butter. Better sleep has never tasted better. A recent clinical study revealed Dream helped 93% of users wake up feeling more refreshed. And listen to this, 93% reported Dream helped them get a more restful night's sleep. Just mix Beam Dream into hot water or milk, stir or froth, and enjoy right before bedtime. If you want to try Beam's best-selling Dream Powder, take advantage of their biggest sale of the year and get up to 50% off for a limited time when you go to shopbeam.com/Sara Carter. That's SARACARTER, and use code CYBER at checkout. That's code CYBER at checkout. That's shop, BEAM.com/SARACARTER, and use code CYBER for up to 50% off. You won't regret it. I'm so grateful to have Senator Ted Cruz on this podcast on the Sara Carter Show. And I hesitated for a minute because I just saw you. I was going to say, I just recently saw you out on the border, Senator. You're nonstop. You are nonstop working for this country. And I'm so blessed to be in Texas now and to have you as my senator. You also are a new author of a great book, Unwoke, How to Defeat Cultural Marxism in America. And I'm so excited because I have a copy of it right here. And I'm reading this book, and I don't think there has ever been a better time for this book than right now.
Well, Sarah, thank you. It's great to be with you. Thank you for having me on your podcast. And it was awesome seeing you down at the southern border. We went out together on midnight patrol with the Border Patrol agents and encountered a group of about 20 or 25, mostly women and children. And what you and I saw together was really, really horrific. And, we saw a 13-year-old girl unaccompanied, a 15-year-old boy unaccompanied, a 16-year-old girl unaccompanied. All of them told us they were going to their TOs, but yet they didn't seem to know who their TOs were. They just knew they had a man and it was a number they were supposed to call. And I still remember with that 13-year-old when she told us that she had a number, you pulled out your cell phone and said, "Here, do you want to call him now?" She's like, "Oh, no. It was very clear she didn't want you to have that number."
Yeah, and, absolutely.
It was just horrific.
Yeah, it is horrific. And I was going to ask you your assessment because I know that this is a huge focus for you. Our national security is a top priority for you. And in the United States, obviously, we've seen the lax of border security has led to a real national security crisis. Yeah. And you also brought up the humanitarian crisis that we're facing. But on the national security level, what's your assessment of the situation, considering what we've seen in Israel and the recent Hamas attack?
I think we have a greater risk of a major terrorist attack in the United States than at any time since September 11th. Tragically, I think it's just a matter of when. You combine the war in the Middle East, and the war in the Middle East was caused in significant part by the fact that Joe Biden has flowed $100 billion to Iran, and Iran funds Hamas, funds Hezbollah. They use that money to murder Israelis and to murder Americans. And with our southern border, it's completely open. We've had over 8 million people cross illegally into this country, and Joe Biden intends for it to stay open. And there's a humanitarian cost. You and I, what was really haunting to me about the group that we met Thursday night was this one girl, you'll remember, who was a 10-year-old girl. And there was a grown man there who said he was her father. She said he was her father. And this man was not her father. Right. He had his arm around her, but it was not a compassionate and loving embrace. It was almost a headlock to hold on to her. And that little girl was terrified. And look, one of the horrific consequences of what happens at our southern border is that the cartels literally rent children to adult men, because if you come in as a family unit, you get expedited. And these kids are subject to horrific abuse. And we saw that. The Border Patrol agents who were with us, there was nothing they could do about it. That's happening every single day. And that doesn't even begin to encompass what we asked the agents about. How concerned are you about Hamas and Hezbollah and terrorists crossing the border? And Customs and Border Patrol in San Diego sent out a written memo to their agents saying, be on watch for Hamas, for Hezbollah, for Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorists coming in and hiding who they are, pretending to be someone else. Just a few days ago, the head of the FBI testified before the House of Representatives that we now had a serious risk of terrorists coming across the southern border. And yet, Joe Biden and the Democrats still refuse to secure the border. They're willing to take that risk. And tragically, I fear we're going to see a lot of Americans maybe die in an attack like what has happened in Israel.
FBI Director Christopher Wray acts like this is a big surprise right now, that what we've seen in Israel is, oh, wow, now we've got to secure the border. You know, you have been saying this for years. You've been saying Alejandro Mayorkas is not doing his job. You've called him out on it. You've called him out on it before the American people at hearings. We've seen Christopher Wray and the way he has, I think, failed in challenging the Biden administration and saying, look, I'm the head of the FBI. He can make a statement. He can say, we're not securing this nation the way we need to secure it. So since Biden has come into office in particular, we have had the border wide open.
Yeah.
If Iran was planning this for the last 2 years and Hamas, if this has been in the works, wouldn't they have used our border if they wanted to move in a sleeper cell, if they wanted to move in people to place them to target what we would call soft targets, a movie theater, a mall, a university, God forbid, anything like this? They would have already put them in here. It wouldn't happen in the last 2 months. It would have happened 2 years ago.
It's been 2.5 years our border's been wide open, and it's been an invitation from Joe Biden to every terrorist that wants to commit murder and mayhem to come across our southern border. And look, it's one of many examples of how our government has gone to the radical left. And that's why I wrote this new book. The book, as you mentioned, it's called Unwoke, How to Defeat Cultural Marxism in America. And what the book is all about, a lot of us look around at every major institution in America, and they've all been captured by the radical left. And this book does a couple of things. It, number one, explains how and why, how this happened, why it happened, what the process was. But then number two, this book is very action-oriented. It's about what we can do to stop it, how we fight back, how we take these institutions back. So the book starts in the universities, because Marxists always start by targeting the kids. As you know, my father fought in the Cuban Revolution. He actually fought alongside Fidel Castro. He was a 14-year-old kid. As my dad describes it now, he said, that's what the revolution was a bunch of 14 and 15-year-old kids who didn't know any better. And if you look at Marxist revolutions, everywhere they happen, they start with teenagers that are young and malleable and idealistic. And at the universities, and starting in the 1960s and the 1970s, Marxists burrowed in and began taking over the universities. And it's what Marxist scholars called the long, slow march through institutions. They realized, you look back to the 1968 Democrat convention where you had violent riots outside and the American people recoiled and then ended up electing Richard Nixon. And the Marxists realized, okay, responding with overt violence is not going to work all that effectively here in the United States. So instead, let's get within the institutions and take them in from the inside. And I call the universities the Wuhan lab of the woke virus, because it's where the virus was created, it's where it mutated, and it's where it spread to every other institution. And it spread from Harvard, really was ground zero. It's my alma mater, and Harvard is responsible for much of this lunacy that is spread across the country.
I love that. The Wuhan lab. Yeah. The Wuhan lab of the woke virus are our universities. Do you think that's related to what we're seeing as far as like the pro-Hamas protests that we're seeing in the streets and this failure for so many of our youth to even know history accurately or news? I was talking to David Schoen earlier, and he was saying to me, you know, a large number of American university students don't even know about the Holocaust. I mean, they haven't even been taught about that. And they're looking for some place to belong, and they want to fit in somewhere so that they're easily swayed. I know your book focuses on that. Do you think this is why we're seeing such a shift in our culture and in our youth?
So absolutely, yes. So what the cultural Marxists have done and what they're trying to do is seize the organs of transmission of ideas and use them for control and power. If you look at Marxism, Karl Marx wrote about how the world was economically determined. There was an inevitable struggle between the oppressors and the victims, and he looked along socioeconomic lines. So the oppressors were the owners of capital, and the victims were the proletariat, the working people. And his solution was a violent revolution of the proletariat to overthrow the owners of capital and use government to forcibly redistribute to the victims. What the cultural Marxists have done is they've expanded that, so now it's not just socioeconomic, it's not just wealth. They applied it to race. Critical race theory uses the same prism of inevitable conflict, but instead they say America is irredeemably racist, and it's a conflict between races that they decide are oppressors and races that are victims, and their solution is the same: the violent overthrow and government using force to punish the oppressors and to reward the victims. They do that with gender and gender ideology and the radical transgender movement. Again, it's oppressors and victims. And when you look at what's happening in our universities and Hamas, I recently sat down with a very successful tech entrepreneur who's always been quite left of center. And he was really horrified at the anti-Semitism that we're seeing on the extreme left in Congress and the squad and our universities. And I told him, I said, look, for the radical left, Jews are coded as oppressors, and the Palestinians are coded as the victims. Now, the Marxist solution to that is straightforward, and it is that the victims should violently overthrow the oppressors and take everything they have. And that's why you see so many leftists cheering on what is happening. One of the things I describe in the book Unwoke, Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter, the institution, not the phrase. The phrase is unquestionably true. Yes, of course, Black Lives Matter, period, the end. But the institution, Black Lives Matter, Inc., the organization, it was founded by avowed Marxists. They were trained Marxists. They had been trained to foment communist revolution. And they are vicious racists. They are vicious anti-Semites. They hate Israel. One of the founders of Black Lives Matter said she sought the destruction of the state of Israel. Right after this attack on October 7th in Israel, multiple different branches of Black Lives Matter sent out statements in support. The Chicago Black Lives Matter chapter sent out a tweet with an image of a man hang gliding saying, we support the Palestinians. Now, the hang gliding were the Hamas terrorists who hang glided into the concert and sat there with machine guns just murdering teenagers and young people who had gone to an outdoor concert. They embrace violence and terrorism. That's what Marxism is. And the book Unwoke describes how that started in the universities. Then it went to K through 12 education. Then it went to journalism. Then it went to big tech. Then it went to big business. Then it went to entertainment, movies, TV, sports, music. Then it went to science. And the last chapter of the book is China, which is a nexus that connects all of them. And it describes what happened, why it happened, but also how we fight back and how we take these institutions back.
I thought it was so important that you talk about it. I love the way you just laid it out. And you also give tools in your book for parents and for citizens to fight back, to take control of our lives, of our communities. And it was so important. You brought up your dad. And when he was young and 14, I'm also Cuban, daughter of a Cuban immigrant. My friends from Cuba, especially that were in my age group that came later, would tell me they remembered in the schools being indoctrinated when they were very little, to even turn their parents in, if they violated state law or if they spoke out against Fidel Castro. So the children were already being brainwashed by kindergarten. And I've noticed that in the United States, and particularly, I think we saw a lot more during COVID, which is why I think Loudoun County was such a great example, and what happened in Virginia, where parents were like, wait a minute, what are you teaching our children and what's going on here? So it's not just about Cuba. Your book is so important because it's about us. Yeah. We're a republic. We're supposed to be a democracy based on a constitution. And we're slowly watching the erosion of that. Do you think it's also seeped in to our bureaucracy and even with our lawmakers, like the Squad and everybody else, this kind of ideological rhetoric that is not only anti-Semitic, but anti-American?
Absolutely, yes. If you look at the Democrat Party today, the far left is radicalized. They are open Marxists. Bernie Sanders is a Marxist. He literally honeymooned in the Soviet Union. Now, what kind of nutcase does that? Heidi and I, we honeymooned in St. Thomas. That's a very normal place to honeymoon. A beach, it was fun. We had some daiquiris. We walked barefoot in the sand. That's a honeymoon.
Right.
If you go to the Soviet Union to visit your comrades at the Kremlin, that tells you something. And you know, AOC,
and especially back then, Senator, it wasn't like, you know, it was right now, like where there may be some, you know, great restaurants, or that, you know, Moscow might have some areas where you might want to go or frequent. I mean, Bernie Sanders frequented when it was the USSR. Yeah. He was like hanging out and getting he was in the bread line. He was in the bread line, literally getting a slice of bread. Well, the only
thing is, I'm willing to bet he wasn't in the bread line, because the thing about communism, it's not about equality. The members of the party live like kings. Putin is a billionaire and lives like a king. The Castros lived like kings. Communism is all about seizing power. The owners of Black Lives Matter bought multi-million-dollar mansions with the money given to them from big business, giant corporations that were virtue signaling. And I'll tell you, it's interesting. So I recently I do a podcast every week, Verdict with Ted Cruz. And a couple of weeks ago, one of the podcasts I did was Black Lives Matter is Hamas. And I walked through the Marxist history of Black Lives Matter, and I listed a bunch of the corporations that wrote big checks to Black Lives Matter, like Amazon, like Apple, like Coca-Cola. Well, that podcast came out October 18th. The next day, Coca-Cola edited their websites to delete any mentions of Black Lives Matter. They'd given $500,000 to Black Lives Matter, and they erased it because I asked, does Coca-Cola support the destruction of the state of Israel? Do they embrace this anti-Semitism? And their reaction was, never mind. And they just silently erased it, didn't acknowledge anything, didn't apologize. And that's an example of both the corporate Marxists taking over big business, but also how you hold them accountable, how you shine a light and force them to change. And, you know, Sarah, you mentioned the kids.
Right.
A story that I tell in the book, right at the front, is I tell the story of my grandmother. So my grandmother, my abuela, was a sixth grade teacher in Cuba. And she loved teaching. She taught for many, many years. And when Castro took over, the communists always start with the kids. They target the kids. Che Guevara, I describe how he described kids as malleable clay that you can remove all the defects from. And by defects, they mean any attachment to anything other than the state. And my grandmother told me the story about how right after Castro took over, they sent their soldiers into the classrooms, into the kindergartens and the first grades. And the soldiers would tell the little kids, close your eyes and pray to God and ask for candy. And the kids did, and they opened their eyes, there was no candy. And then the soldiers said, close your eyes and pray to Fidel Castro for candy. And the kids did, and the soldiers all quietly put little pieces of candy on the desks in front of the kids. That is Marxism, and they begin with 5-year-olds. You look at this radical transgender ideology, and the book explains how they're targeting 5-year-olds. They're targeting kids before they know any better. But you also mentioned quite rightly Loudoun County, and I talk in the book about how parents rose up and said enough is enough. This woke ideology you can defeat, you can throw the school board out, you can take it over. And that's happening all over the country as parents realize the garbage that's being taught to their kids and begin to shine a light on it and exercise power, and that's what we need to do.
Absolutely. And when you also mentioned the media is a huge problem here, because when you have an independent media that's objective, or for the most part objective, I think all human beings are fallible and all media is somewhat fallible. But for example, even with the New York Times, recently, we saw the story about the hospital and the fact that the New York Times had put it on the front page that Israel had basically bombed the hospital, and it turned so many people against the state of Israel, or it was used as a propaganda campaign, only later to have walk that back because the information was inaccurate. But when you have media that is so important, or mainstream media that is supposed to be giving the accurate information, and they're more ideological than they are based on accuracy, that becomes a big problem too, right? Especially for our republic.
Yeah, look, that is exactly right. And we're seeing that play out with the corporate media. I have an entire chapter that focuses on the corrupt corporate media, and they have been thoroughly corrupted. If you look back a decade ago, many in the corporate media viewed their job a decade ago as being fair and impartial, as presenting both sides. They were bad at it. I use CNN as an example. CNN a decade ago, if you asked them, they would say, we want to present both sides. We want to be fair and balanced. Now, they were terrible at it. They leaned hard left. But they were, in their minds, they were trying to present a balanced story. I used to go on CNN once a week. I've been on CNN 50, 100 times. And I used to regularly go on, and you could have a conversation. Even though it slanted left, they tried. What happened is Donald Trump broke the media. They hate him so much that they now foam at the mouth. They are now, in their minds, they are no longer trying to present both sides. They view their job as propagandists. They have a mission. They have a message to tell. And we see this in as you described, the coverage of what's happened in Israel. And I did another podcast on Verdict that was entitled, CNN is Hamas's Air Force. So is MSNBC, so is ABC. Here's the evidence. And I walked through about a dozen different clips that I played on the podcast and went through. And it's important to understand Hamas's strategy. They know they can't defeat Israel. They're not strong enough to defeat Israel. So what Hamas does is they deliberately use human shields. We know that in this war, there are going to be Palestinian civilian casualties. Why? Because Hamas wants Palestinians to die. They put their headquarters in the basement of a hospital. They put missiles in kindergartens because they know that when Israel takes out military targets, Hamas wants dead Palestinians, ideally dead women and children. because then the useful idiots in the media will use those images to demonize Israel, and that is part of their battle plan. And the hospital is a great example. Hamas put out as propaganda that Israel has bombed a hospital in Gaza and killed 500 Palestinians. And immediately the New York Times and CNN and AP and all the useful idiots reported it as news because it was the narrative that they wanted to push. It turns out every part of that was a lie. Number one, Israel didn't bomb it. Israel uses precision munitions that are guided. Israel targets military targets, so they don't bomb hospitals. It turns out that the rocket in question was fired by Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and they don't use guided munitions. Their rockets are basically some propellant, an explosive, and a bunch of shrapnel, ball bearings or nails, and they just fire them in the air, generally in the direction of Israel, and hope it hits someone and kills a lot of people. And a significant percentage of the Palestinian rockets end up going off in Gaza because they don't have any way to steer them. They just shoot them. So this was a Palestinian rocket fired by the terrorists. And it turned out, by the way, it didn't even hit the hospital. It hit the parking lot outside the hospital. So there were not
Correct.
500 Palestinians killed. It hit a parking lot. So every part of the story was a lie.
But
and yet the New York Times did its job.
But the lie's already out there, Senator.
Yes.
It's like mud. They throw it out there. The lie sticks. They see what sticks. And then people believe the lie because nobody goes back to find out the truth. And when we were on the border, and I thought it was so brilliant, we were out there talking. It was you, Senator Mike Lee, Senator Barrasso, Senator Ricketts. And we're standing out there and you said something. You said, what went wrong in Israel? And it's the same thing that we're seeing in the United States. It's this complacency. This, idea that everyone thinks the way we do. We saw the barbarism of Hamas. It was beyond anything normal. It's even hard for me to talk about it, to think about babies being put in ovens, babies being beheaded. I mean, Israel literally had to show CNN the video to get them to believe it. It's like, let me show you what Hamas recorded, not what we recorded, but what Hamas recorded.
Yeah.
And now we have Iran, even in our own hemisphere, spreading, and we've seen them here for decades, but it's so much more now in Venezuela, in Central America, in Mexico, and we have a border that's wide open. Do you think we're complacent as well? Do you think we can wake up one morning and just be like, what happened? How did this happen?
Of course we are. And it's important to understand, in Iran, the Ayatollah, he regularly leads mobs in chanting death to America and death to Israel. And I think if history teaches anything, it's when someone tells you they want to kill you, believe them. Iran right now is actively trying to murder Mike Pompeo, the former Secretary of State of the United States, John Bolton, the former National Security Advisor to the President, and Brian Hook, the former Assistant Secretary of State. Iran has contracts to murder them out. Right now, today, the U.S. Department of State is spending $2 million a month on security to protect those officials from Iranian hitmen trying to murder them. And when I question the Biden administration simultaneously has flowed $100 billion to Iran while they're trying to murder senior U.S. government officials. If they're trying to murder the U.S. Secretary of State, you think they'd be happy murdering a bunch of Americans at a shopping mall or a movie theater or what have you? Look, this administration is inviting mass murder to America.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You said it better than anyone. And I know Brian Hook. I remember when he was working at State, phenomenal person. I understand that Iran means that they mean what they're saying. They mean these threats. They will follow through with them because they promised that they were going to come after the United States, after the kill of General Soleimani, who happened to be the most prolific terrorist on the planet. And it is the greatest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. Human super beats, folks. We all have a heartfelt reason to support our blood pressure. I know I'm traveling a lot. I want to make sure I'm healthy and I'm ready not only for my work, but for my family. Number one, I want to be there for them. In fact, more than half of the US population would benefit from blood pressure support. Paired with a healthy lifestyle, the antioxidants in Super Beets are clinically shown to be nearly 2 times more effective at promoting normal blood pressure than a healthy lifestyle alone. I carry them with me everywhere. I'm traveling to New York, back and forth all these past 2 weeks. Guess what? I've got my human Super Beets right here in my pocket, and I take them when I travel. It is just that easy. 2 Super Beets and you're set for the rest of the day. Folks, supporting healthy blood pressure comes with a bonus too. Super Beet Heart Chew supports healthy circulation. So you not only get the good blood pressure support, but guess what? You also get productive, heart healthy energy without the crash. Double your potential with Super Beets Heart Chews. Get a free 30-day supply of Super Beets Heart Chews and 15% off your order by going to getsuperbeets.com and using promo code Sara. That's SARA. That's getsuperbeets.com. Code Sara. Hey, y'all, I'm talking to you. Hit that subscribe button down below so you don't miss any of the great episodes of the Sara Carter Show and all of the great guests. Thank you. It really makes a difference. I believe that all of us need to wake up. I think this is why you put together this book, Woke. I want everyone to see this. I want everyone to be able to order this book, Senator. Where can we get this? On Amazon? I'm sure Barnes & Noble, wherever you get your books, right?
Wherever you get your books, you can order it on Amazon. You can go to Barnes & Noble. You can order it on Books A Million. You can order it online. Click on it and it'll arrive in a day or two. And I'll tell you, the book is designed to be very readable. It's not an academic treatise. It's not abstract. It's telling stories. It's bringing you inside what's really going on and explaining what's happening, because I think that's how you really understand, but it's also highlighting strategies where we win. So for example, the chapter on big business.
Right.
I focus up close on Bud Light and what happened to Bud Light. And it was, I don't think we've ever seen a brand destroy their brand as utterly as Bud Light did. And it was the arrogance of the corporate Marxists that looked down on their customers. It's like they never met a guy drinking Bud Light, and they wanted them all to be woke transgender college kids. And Bud Light went from the #1 selling beer in America to it's dropped out of the top 10, and they've lost billions and billions of dollars. Look, you know, I was at the World Series. I go to a lot of baseball games. I used to all the time drink Bud Light. That was my standard drink. What is amazing, I looked around at the Astros, Rangers, and the ALCS. There was literally not a single person I could see in the stadium drinking Bud Light. Every person had shifted and said, to hell with that. And they still had Bud Light on the shelves. And I walk through, and what's powerful, so I connect what happened to Bud Light to what happened to Target, where Target began targeting little kids with transgender ideology, tuck-friendly baby suits for 3-year-old boys so they could tuck their genitals and pretend to be girls. And moms got pissed.
It's so crazy. No, this is so crazy, Senator, that we're even talking about this. My husband doesn't even go into Target. He can't even go into Target. Even if we stopped going for a long time, they kind of stopped it. They rolled it back. And I would say to him, you know what, we should go into Target because it's a local, community. They've rolled it back. He's like, no, I just can't. He goes, I can't get over it. And there's so many men that can't get over it either. They don't even want to pick up a Bud Light because they felt like they were trying to be forced to be something they weren't. And I think that's the problem. It's like Americans are so tired of being manipulated and toyed with and talked down to, the deplorables, the stinky Walmart shopper, the farmer. Americans are tired of being talked down to. And I think what and everywhere I go in the country, and I know you too, Americans just want people to listen to them. They want their lawmakers to listen to them. They want people to respect what they do and what they say. What can we do as Americans to ensure that our nation continues to stay on the right track? I mean, I think there's more of us than there are of them.
There is a silent majority. I think you're absolutely right. And look, the left knows this. That's why they use power. They use force to jam their ideology down our throats, because they know they can't persuade us. As a word of encouragement, so as I describe what happens to Bud Light and then I describe what happened to Target, in Target, and I quote the conversations among their executives right as the scandal was breaking, and what they were saying was, we don't want to be another Bud Light. Let's not be a Bud Light. That is fantastic. The way you stop this is you change the cost-benefit analysis for the next corporate CEO or the next corporate board that is thinking of going woke, that is thinking of doing some idiocy. You make the costs high enough that they say, let's just stay out of it. Let's focus on selling Coca-Cola instead of sending money to Black Lives Matter, the Marxists who are rabid anti-Semites.
Hey, Disney's learned the lesson too, or it's learning the lesson. I don't know if CNBC ever brings it up. I do like CNBC. I do watch this, our stocks, but it's so funny to watch how like they try to walk around the whole Disney thing. When you talk to parents, it's like, yeah, we quit that Disney platform because it was too much. It was too much on our kids. We weren't going in that direction, or we're Christian. We don't want to follow that. Or even if they're Muslim, even if they're Jewish, it's like, this is a radical progressive company. And I think they learned their lesson and they're trying to roll back some of that as well.
I fully agree. And look, most people prefer their princesses not to have a mustache and a beard. like this is not complicated stuff.
We don't want princesses with beards and mustaches. Yes, thank you very much. We want them to remain princesses. Okay, now one more time, I want everybody, you guys, first of all, you got to listen to the Senator's podcast, but you also have to buy this book, Unwoke, because together, How to Defeat Cultural Marxism in America. We are the soldiers. We are the foot soldiers in America, doing it the right way, the way our founding fathers envisioned us doing this, which is going to the ballot box, voting for people like Senator Ted Cruz, voting for people that actually care about their constituents, and then standing up to these crazies. There are more of us than there are of them. We don't need to worry about it. Don't make your kids wear dresses.
And by the way, the book makes a great Christmas present. We got Christmas coming up, so maybe you can get it for your mom, get it for your son, get it for your next door neighbor.
Absolutely.
But the reason I wrote this book is we need people to read it and understand what is happening, and in particular, understand how we fight back and how we take our country back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope you come back on the show, Senator. There's so many things I want to talk to you about, particularly not only with our border, but on the national level and on a foreign policy level as well. I know you're well versed in foreign policy and the threats that we're facing in the United States right now. I got to say, being on the border with you was incredible. It was great to watch you there and to see how much you actually cared about what was happening. Folks, we have lawmakers that actually want to make a difference. They're out there past midnight on a very dangerous border doing the job that our federal government will not do at the executive level. So thank you so much, Senator, for what you do. And I look forward to you coming back on the Sara Carter Show.
Awesome. I appreciate it.
A big thank you to Senator Ted Cruz for coming on the show and sharing your new book. Folks, stand up against the woke mind virus and stand up for truth. It's the only way to get rid of that virus and stop its evil spread. Please make sure you are subscribed to the Sara Carter Show here on your favorite podcast app. It really helps. Follow me on Truth at Sara Carter Official, on X at Sara Carter DC, and on Instagram at SCarterDC. God bless you. God bless our great nation. God bless our children and their amazing future. Pray for peace in the Middle East. And God bless the great state of Texas.